The other thing, I wrote about this a little bit in the Awful Announcing newsletter. And I want to throw it off of you. It's a little heady, but like this idea of like what is a news break when there is no like context for it ahead of time, right? It's like that was the beginning, but it actually told us, it made us more confused. It told us nothing because it's like the fact that we all thought he got hacked illustrates exactly how that it's too little. It's a starting point. It's not even really news. It's almost like it might as well be fake because it makes no sense. Do you know what I'm saying? Like what all the content and the analysis is one thing, but even the reporting that came afterward, it almost like kind of showed that stuff matters in a weird way because we knew nothing about this and we needed to know more.
Yeah, it's like, what's the point? Like, if we all and I didn't experience it in real time, and so I don't think I would have thought he got hacked. I think I would have been wowed and I would have been amazed, but like maybe I'm just too trusting or too naive. But like I would have been like, Shams is the authority. If it's on Shams's feed, like it must be real. But it seems like the overwhelming reaction was like he got hacked, and
everybody thought it.
And I understand that based on the content of the news, but to your point, what's the point? Like if we have to, if Shams breaks it and then we have to wait for, who was it? Bobby Marks, like somebody else to chime in and be like, no, this is real. This is legit.
Well,
like,
and not even the reality of it, but also just because it was so shocking. It's like the why is the thing we want to know at that point. It's like, okay, Luka's going to be playing in another jersey now. Obviously, we'll go watch and that'll be its own thing. But it's like, I don't, maybe I'm not making my point clearly, but it's like, really what we needed in that moment was all of the stuff that's come since. And normally we have that ahead of time. We like, if Jimmy Butler gets traded, it'll be like, finally. He's been going to battle with Pat Riley. He's been suspended a few times. He's putting all sorts of nonsense on his Instagram story and dyeing his hair and doing all this stuff. So it'll be like the finality of a story. This was like the beginning of a story, and it's almost like I don't care about the trade unless I know the details, because otherwise it's just like, all right, two guys are going to be playing on different teams, like that's crazy, but I don't really care. I'll just go watch the same way I would have if Luka was on the Mavs. Do you know what I'm saying?
So I think I might be like a good test case for this because I watched the Windhorse clip and I watched the Shams clip, and the Shams clip is telling you what happened and the Windhorse clip is telling you like the why. And like to me, as somebody learning about this trade, the Windhorse clip went way further in terms of like shaping what I thought about the trade and explaining the trade to me and even informing me of the trade. And like, not only did this shocking thing happen, but this is like the real story about what this means and how it came to fruition and like how this was even possible in the first place, as opposed to just being, 3 lines on the NBA transaction feed that are copy and pasted to Shams's X feed.
And I think that is always true with insiders, right? Like that's kind of what I'm getting at is like the job and the role of an insider, where we think of them as this integral part of the whole media and the whole sport that they cover. But because we typically, their tweet, their Sports Center hit, the clip, or whatever way we consume them typically is like the culmination of a saga. It always feels that way. Okay, they're going to let us know when this thing is finally happening. But when it's the beginning of it, it's almost like we just blow right past it. Like they serve almost no purpose because the why is so much more important, and they're not giving that to us. They never give it to us because usually we already know it. In this case, we didn't know it, and they weren't giving it to us. So it was just kind of like, I think that had a lot to do with why people were like, well, he must have been hacked because this is not the way this goes.
Well, so Adam Schefter was actually on Andrew Marchand's podcast, The Main Event with Andrew Marchand, and he was asked about this basically. Andrew said, one of the criticisms of you is you just tell us what's going to happen 5 minutes before we would have found out about it anyways. And Adam, as you would imagine, got really fired up and said, like, yeah, that does happen sometimes. Like there are instances where, like, I'll tell you a player is questionable to return, and you'll find out 2 minutes later he's questionable to return. I don't think that's really what Marshawn was getting at, but he said, that's part of the job, but also part of the job is look at my reporting on Ben Johnson. And while everybody was pegging him to the Raiders, I was saying, why are we counting Chicago out of this? And I was trying to lay the breadcrumbs to show that there was still like an avenue for him to go to Chicago. And so that, to me, is at least a version of this. Is like the real value is to be plugged into the league, to be able to inform not only transactions that are happening, but the backstory and the backdrop to those transactions. And yeah, to me, like, right, that's the Woj quote, right? Is this is all vapor. And that's
and that's what I used in the newsletter. Yeah.
Right.
He said no one remembers the break. And I think he's absolutely right. And I think people took that as like this existential like doom that Woj was trying to say. But I really think that his point was like, from Woj's standpoint, the relationships that he was able to form, the experiences he was able to go have covering and reporting on the sport, like that was the part of the job that he began to realize mattered to him more. And that's what he's doing at St. Bonaventures and whatever. That's a Woj conversation. But it was proven so true because it was like, okay, cool, get the tweet out of my face. What the hell's going on here? You know what I mean? Like that was sort of the thing. And then, I don't know. I think this is a bigger conversation we can obviously get to a different time, but I think the way that these guys are deployed is also part of it. Like even something with Schefter, it's like he's almost limited to like, well, if you have more context and you have something else you want to, provide to the audience beyond just the thing happening 5 minutes beforehand, well, fit it into 60 seconds on, Monday Night Countdown. Otherwise, who knows if anyone's going to see it. Whereas like Windhorst has a podcast. Windhorst has like a weekly column. I know I'm jumping around on sports, but you could do that with, any number. Even Diana Rossini has a little bit of a different role versus like how Adam Schefter's just deployed and she's at The Athletic. The way that ESPN kind of uses their top insiders is weird. I'm sure they know more, right? But like to go back to Schefter, why is he not on the Mina Kimes show ever? Why is he not on whatever, fill in the blank, to be a little bit more loose and free flowing? He's like, it's weird. And so
he does go on McAfee.
He does. Yeah, that's true. He does. And, I guess it's all sort of, there's different reasons for all of it, but I just thought it was fascinating. My last thing on the NBA though is, again, they do this better than anybody, but I think the criticism for a long time has sort of been to what end? They can't monetize this attention. Like Adam Silver would say, well, look at what happened Saturday night and tell us we're not popular. But I don't know what that means in a situation where, like, their cable is declining and all the stuff you and I talked about when we did our what's going on with the NBA hate episode a few weeks ago. It's like, I don't disagree that this shows the NBA is popular, but if it doesn't make people turn around and go watch, then I don't know what that matters to anybody,
I think this, to steal another Bill Simmons-ism, is a unicorn moment, because I do think there's going to be a tangible fallout from this. I think, especially with the NFL season coming to an end, like there's going to be renewed interest in the Lakers. I think this is kind of like a fresh coat of paint on just the NBA product in general, with one of its most high profile teams, its most high profile team, and now two of its highest profile stars. And so I could see like this resulting in a ratings increase and when the Lakers are on national television and maybe even general interest in the league. But I don't think this is something that's replicable. And I also think it's ultimately something that could have diminishing returns if this is what you're relying on, is just players. Like, I think that's when you get into like fans in local fan bases just being like, what's the point of any of this? Like, why am
Lakers exceptionalism stuff obviously turns people off.
Yeah. What, because you follow the NBA and you follow all this way more closely than I do. And it seems like the reaction has all been the same. And it's just been, what the hell are the Mavericks doing? giving up on Luka, which I think is totally valid. Like, I think that's the story. Is like, what the hell are they doing giving up on Luka? I actually, and maybe I'm going to sound crazy, I don't think the way they went about it is all that crazy. Like, I think if you're going to shop a star, it makes sense to do it in private so that that player can't flex his muscles and say, well, I'm only going to re-sign with Team X, or I'm going to cause a stink. And also, I think a part of the equation is like the Mavericks are just going all in without Luka for these next 2 years, and then probably looking at a rebuild post Kyrie and Clay and maybe even AD. So I just feel like the story here is giving up on Luka, not necessarily the way they went about it. And it seemed like it all got lumped together.
If you're gonna try to sell new ownership, deep pocketed ownership, post Mark Cuban on parting ways with one of the best players to ever touch a basketball, I think getting another one of the best players to ever touch a basketball is kind of like the only sell you probably can make versus some young prospects on the Houston Rockets or something. So I don't think that's crazy. And you've already seen Luka through Brian Windhorst leak, I'm not necessarily signing an extension this summer. And that's exactly what would have happened with the Rockets or any other team if Luka caught wind that he was, being offered to the highest bidder. Is then his negotiating tactics start to play a role versus, just get it done clean and easy. The most interesting part of this to me, though, from more of a macro standpoint, is we'll see if this is true. But I'm going to be very curious to see if this is a one-off in terms of teams balking at paying their franchise cornerstones, even ones who are as good as this, or if this is like a much deeper cut impact of the new NBA collective bargaining agreement and the really harsh kind of like getting closer to a hard cap type measures that they implemented. Because if that CBA creates the environment where even a player like Luka Doncic, who was in the finals last year and is an MVP candidate every season, is at risk to be dumped because of money, then the league fucked up big time, because that's not something you should be encouraging with the rules of your sport, no matter how much you're trying to help small market owners or anything else. That's a major issue. If we're talking about, well, who knows about if the Nuggets want to sign Jokic to an extension, we shouldn't be wondering that.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be a no-brainer. You know what I mean? So that is going to be fascinating to me.
Yeah, it seems like nobody likes this new CBA. It seems like I used to like totally understand the CBA and could do bird rights and all trade matching and all that. And now like it just seems like nobody likes this new CBA, except maybe I guess the players.
Some of the players, but
yeah,
I mean, because of it's different rules for every team, and I think that's what they're really running up against. It would, depending on where you are, your team has different rules. That's hard to keep track of for the average fan.